Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Maximize Excellence podcast. My name's Lori Harris, and I'm your host today. I'm really excited to have Erica Allen, Esquire and Managing Attorney of DiAngelo Law, with us today. And a little bit about Erica, which I love this bio. You're going to love this. It's a lot of fun. Erica is a legal nerd. Now, you don't hear many attorneys call themselves that, but you know what? You're going to love her. You're going to find that she's just absolutely brilliant in a lot of her tools that she has, a lot of services she offers. So she's a legal nerd, a creative entrepreneur, a fashionista, and a foodie. So get that combo and have some fun being an attorney is all I can say. And Erica founded DiAngelo Law in 2015. It's a trademark law firm serving businesses around the world. It's Erica's goal to help bring visionary dreams to life by empowering others to start, to protect, and to grow their businesses while staying focused on their own zones of genius and in alignment with their goals. She does this through a holistic approach to professional legal services, which include trademarks and intellectual properties, contracts, and strategic consulting. When she's not helping somebody strategize and secure their trademarks, you'll probably find her traveling, out on the boat, snuggling with her dog Zelda, or nose deep in a nonfiction book with a glass of wine by her side. So everyone, please join me. Let's welcome Erica Allen. Hello, Erica.
Thank you, Laura. And I think everything's been good so far, but just hopping on, it had a glitch. So fingers crossed. I don't know what's going on. I'm on data. Island life can be difficult sometimes.
Okay, well, we'll how about we just accept it and we'll just go with it, and we'll just create pauses if we have to try and make this work. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
How are you doing?
Today's a great day, right? It's a great day for a great day. I want to dive in because I think this topic of trademarks and the legality of it and what it can do for businesses is dynamic. And I love that you're a virtual-based business. I think that, maybe COVID forced you into that. Maybe you could just up front give us some background on you getting started, because 2015 was right before COVID hit. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so 2015, I was already doing stuff virtual, and I got a lot of pushback, to be honest. I had a lot of clients who weren't super comfortable with it. I even had one guy who hired me call the Florida bar and confirm that I was a real attorney because he couldn't wrap his head around this whole virtual process. So I loved doing it back then. And then I already kind of had everything set up and working this way prior to COVID. And then that kind of opened the doors for other people to get used to this and feel more comfortable. But initially, it was more of the innovative, forward-thinking clients that it appealed to, because they're like, why do I need to drive and go, find parking and sit in traffic to go sit in a lawyer's office when we can really make this a much more efficient process with technology? So I've loved doing that since 2015, and it's only just gotten easier and more widely accepted. And trademarks is a federal practice area, so I get to represent clients all over the place.
I love it. I do. I love it. And you're right. Trying to find parking around attorneys' offices is difficult. It's always difficult. So that's wonderful. And you state here, education is empowerment, and part of your mission is supporting visionaries. And you go on to talk about leading with education is the path to success for all of us. Why don't you go ahead and dive into the insights about that?
Absolutely. So, first, I would just say you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things that we all run into as people, as business owners, whatever we're doing in life. And I found that even when I started my law firm back in 2015, I wasn't initially doing trademarks. I started out and I was litigating, and I named my business DiAngelo Law because I thought that you just used your last name, and that was my last name at the time. I didn't even know, as an attorney, the extent of implications with trademark law and intellectual property. But as my business expanded and as I sort of followed down this path of supporting small businesses and helping with intellectual property, some of that came to life, the you don't know what you don't know part. And so I really want to spread that word to help people learn about these things that aren't super talked about in the general business space, to help people avoid running into pitfalls and to actually harness this as a tool for success, because it's not just about protection. It's also a way that companies can be very successful and actually scale their business if they have a grasp around, the intellectual property and trademark components.
I love it. And so what is intellectual property, the foundation, and what's the foundational understanding of why it's important?
Yeah, so intellectual property is a lot broader than most people might think. So intellectual property is basically a set of tools that can be used to protect literary works, inventions, processes. And in businesses, almost every business is going to have a trademark. That is the source identifier, whether it's a name, a slogan, a logo, all of the above. It could even be sounds and scents. So almost every business will have that. But beyond that, businesses typically have a unique selling proposition, something about their business that makes them stand out from their competitors, that makes their processes run smoothly, whether it's a specific methodology for the way that they do things, whether it's a set of processes, internal processes that they have. I mean, really, about 90% of business assets nowadays are intellectual property. We don't have most businesses, even the big ones, don't have a ton of equipment that is making up the value. It's all intellectual property that's accounting for the value.
Right. And so who needs to be thinking about IP and trademarks the most?
The most. So pretty much any business owner, but I would also include personal brands in that, because that is what a personal brand really is about these days. It's about reputation. It's about the intellectual property that the personal brands are creating, their message, their content, all of that is intellectual property as well. So when you think about service-based business, they're a lot of times creators, even if they don't label themselves that way. And when you create, that means intellectual property is very important.
So don't know if this is a good question or not. Can personal brands be within a business?
Yeah, definitely. So I've seen a trend amongst a lot of my clients, and I think it's going to keep going in this direction, where a lot of businesses will sort of be tied to a personal brand, usually of the owner. I can say to my own business, it's like that to an extent. But one of the cool things about intellectual property is if you have a plan or a strategy in place, you can separate that if you want to. You can, and that's kind of what I'm doing as well. My last name is now Allen, but I kept my law firm DiAngelo Law. And I'm creating a separation of intellectual property because I want my business to be a business and run without me. Otherwise, that's just, being self-employed. That's just creating a job for myself. So I think that it can be a really great tool to have a personal brand within a business, but you can also separate them if you really want that business to run without you and be able to scale.
Excellent. Thanks. And why is protecting it important? Why protect it?
It's a great question. And there's a lot of reasons. I could talk a lot about that, but I will name some of the most important ones. And I would say first is reputation protection. We are building our reputations as businesses, as personal brands,
Right.
as anybody. If you're selling a product or a service, your reputation is everything, and it's inherently tied to the goodwill of your business, the value of it, and that's all tied directly into trademarks as well. So let's go have this example of a client I have, who he has a company that has a really great reputation on a local level, and he's slowly expanding. Well, a company in a different state started using the same name,
Yeah.
and apparently that company's not paying all their bills. So, my client's now getting invoices in the mail, they're getting angry customers calling, and it's the wrong company. They just happen to have the same name, and the SEO has gotten good for that other company. And so now it's creating a problem for this client of mine who's had, done such a good job creating this reputation. So because he understood the importance of trademarks, we're able to resolve this. In fact, we were able to even get that website taken down. So the SEO is no longer a problem. So that just is an illustration of what can happen and how you can have recourse to really protect your reputation, and the fact that it's actually an asset. Your trademark, your name of your business is actually an asset.
Okay, so you mentioned the importance of that because of SEO as well. Can you talk a little bit more about the legal component of that website and that digital IP that you're talking about? That's
Yeah.
important as well. Yeah.
Right. So if somebody's searching for your business online, obviously you want to be the first one that pops up. You want people to easily identify you. And side note, that's why when you pick a weak name, like a super common name, you're not doing yourself a favor for SEO. You're actually just burying yourself with other leads and other companies. But that being said, if you do have a stronger name and a name that you actually protect through trademark registration, you have recourse to be able to take down copycats. So in the example I was using, the copycat, claims that they do business in all the states, and their SEO had grown and grown, and it's the same industry. So since that website was up, we were able to have it taken down because we could show that it was owned and protected through trademark registration, and it was essentially an infringement. Now, they don't make a legal determination, but if you can show the proof, the host, like GoDaddy, will take those down. So you probably hear about cyber squatting, and that's a thing. You can't necessarily make somebody transfer over the domain if they're not using it in a way that's a violation. If they just own the domain and they don't have anything posted up, you might not be able to get the domain. But if they are infringing you, they are causing SEO problems or confusion in the marketplace, you have access to, take that action and get that taken down.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you for going a little bit deeper there. And so how is trademarks and reputation, how do they go hand in hand?
Great question. Trademark sort of encompasses the reputation, because the purpose of a trademark is a source identifier. So that's why it's usually the name is the most common type of trademark. But anything that is tied to the source, it's all about reputation. That's why you can go anywhere in the world and order your favorite Starbucks drink, and it's going to be the same. If you see that Little Mermaid, that it's going to be consistent. That is part of their reputation. So it really just, trademarks is almost like the house of the reputation. That's where it's all tied up. And if somebody else can use it, or I just see so many different instances where people just didn't realize that somebody else had already existed before them. And, they get a good run going of a few years in business, and they are housing that reputation, but then they have to change it because whatever happened, they have to actually change the name. And then that all of that reputation that was tied up with it sort of doesn't always get to go along with the new name.
Right. And now I want you to talk about, go deeper into personal brands and how, say, and use me for an example, maybe. I mean, let's play, right? And so if I, Lori Harris, am a personal brand, it's becoming pretty important. I'm connecting with and networking with a lot of people. My name is selected and put on a lot of things. And so talk about the importance and the protection of that, and talk and also describe deeper what a personal brand is.
Okay, yeah. So you, as Lori Harris, are also cultivating a reputation, even
Yes,
apart from Harris Whitesell Consulting, right?
correct.
And maybe that's a lot of speaking engagements. Maybe that's a lot of your unique thoughts. You're a thought leader, and that's part of your personal brand. So, as bear with me while I use this as an obvious example, because I know a lot of people might say, well, that's just an extreme. That's never going to happen. But that's not true. So if in walks another Lori Harris who's in a similar space, who, maybe they don't do exactly what you do, but they talk about mindset, or they talk about, business in general. And now it's very similar to my business example. Now their name is popping up in places. Now, when people are talking about Lori Harris, they might be actually talking about the other Lori Harris. And it doesn't have to be exact, right? It doesn't have to be like another Lori Harris pops up. Although, let me tell you, I don't care how unique your name is, it can happen. I have a client I was talking to last week. She has a super unique name, and she's a musician. And there's another musician in the same type of music, the same
Correct.
niche. Yeah. And she had to kind of choose to use like her middle name and an initial instead. And it was a very unique name. So for a similar reason, you want to be able to differentiate yourself from others. You want consumers and your followers to know clearly what your message is. You don't want that to get convoluted with some other Lori's message. And even if it's not Lori Harris, let's just say it's Lori Harrisburg, or maybe it's just Lori, somebody who just calls themselves Lori. That's another one with first name only. It can be really confusing for people. And we want the customer too to be able to easily identify whose message they're listening to, and who they're talking about, because right now people are making purchasing decisions based on trust.
Yes.
So 81% of consumers said they need to be able to trust a brand to buy from them. And I can't remember the other statistic, but I want to say it's roughly a quarter of people have made decisions based on the person that they see on social media, which is, inherently tied to personal brands. We're talking about these people on platforms, whether it's a podcast, whether it's social media, whether it's on LinkedIn, and people are creating their reputation with their personal brand, and other people are relying on that to make decisions and to know who to trust and who to follow, because we are saturated with information, and we want to talk to those people and follow those people that we can trust.
And so I take it you probably represent athletes in a way, and their identities, their personal brands. You represent executives as well, and their personal brands as it relates to the work they do. There's a lot of social influencers out there on social media, right? So they as well would also need that type of protection. I would take it. I mean,
Yeah, lots of
I see a
creative.
lot of people on Amazon just by first name only, and Amazon uses them as an influencer to push product. So I would imagine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in all the industries, like, user generated content is becoming so huge that the
Yes.
user is important. People want to know the user. So it's art, people who are in art, it's people who are music, it has to do with athletes. And a lot of times it's also business owners who have created this own platform, as a speaker or an author or somebody with a message to share.
Yeah, I get it. And so the majority of the value of all business is IP. You mentioned it was about 90%. And
Mm-hmm.
dive deeper into that statistic and talk about how leaders and business owners and these leaders, especially in business, who are creating content and speaking now. I mean, the speaking gigs are tenfold now, more so than ever. So talk about that statistic of 90% of IP.
Yeah, and that statistic's a couple years old, by the way.
Oh gosh, wow.
So I would venture to say that that number is even higher at this point. And
Yeah.
I think historically, when people hear intellectual property, especially when it relates to big companies, people are thinking patent. But it's not. Patents just makes up one segment of intellectual property. And a patent, just briefly, is more like an invention, where we talked about, trademark is a source identifier, copyright protects stuff you create, like blog posts or drawings or any creative works. All of those things matter. And then the internal intellectual property, these businesses matter as well. So it's just so robust. It's really not just about patents anymore. And since the pandemic, the number of filings of intellectual property, trademark applications specifically, has increased more than 60%. And it's just going up and up and up because we live in a global market with the world being online, with businesses functioning remotely. This means that we're all in the same playing field, where it used to be like a business over in California and a business over in New York probably aren't directly competing with each other. But now we're all in the same space. We're in the same channels of trade because we're all online.
Right.
And so that just is another reason why it makes it so important. And getting your intellectual property to be seen, used, and recognized by more and more people is, one of the reasons why that's like one of the values that's growing in all of these businesses. And I often hear that small businesses think that they're too small to be thinking about this. But if you actually reverse engineer some of the more successful companies, you'll see that this was part of their plan from the beginning. The intellectual property was a strategy that they incorporated to actually get that big.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very intentional. How is AI affecting intellectual property?
Ooh, lots to be determined. Some
I know.
preliminary.
I was going to say, I apologize. I know it's not in the dialogue of what we discussed, but it's so important and it's just the hot ticket right now. And since we're on this topic right here, I thought maybe I'd pop it in.
No, I think it's a great question. And I mean, the reality is that there's a lot to be determined because it is so new. So preliminarily, I know that there was a finding about copyright specifically. Like if you have AI create something for you, you can't go get copyright registration because copyright protects the creator.
Mm-hmm.
So AI would be technically the creator, right? And so they can't go get the copyright registration. Now, there's definitely nuances, and I'm not certain what the outcome is going to be officially. But when it comes to, well, I wrote a novel and then I plugged it into AI to get edits, or to just like improve things. There's going to be most likely substantial creation from the creator is going to be enough to say that they are the rightful owner. That's some of the more preliminary findings that I've seen. But we're going to have to get some cases to the Supreme Court to get more clarity on the level of impact that AI is going to have in this intellectual property world.
Yeah, it's kind of the wild, wild west right now with it, right? Yeah.
For sure.
Definitely. And we're going to bump back around to social media and how IP is so valuable. You touched on it. Right now there are billions and billions of people on various platforms on social media. And when you combine a strategy for that and are intentional with it and invest in it properly, it can work amazing value for your company and for you as a influencer as well. So talk about that a little bit deeper and the value of social media with IP.
Ooh, there's so much there. I will start with a little bit similar to what we were talking about with domains earlier. Your handle can be extremely valuable, and you unfortunately don't completely own it. The social media platforms do, but you want to do what you can to protect it. And that can include having trademark rights, and you can do takedowns on social media, which we do commonly. And one of the things is people may start businesses and then they don't cancel the social media account or take it down. So it's just lingering out there, which can contribute to confusion. So, having a mechanism to enforce that and get those things taken down is important. Also with social media, you have access to all these other people's content. And mind you, when you create something, you have some rights to what you created. So being careful to not accidentally violate somebody else's rights, to make sure you're not doing anything that's going to get you in trouble, or where you end up with a cease and desist for, saving a photo off of Google and using it when you probably didn't think it was a big deal. But it is, because with copyright registration, there's what's called statutory damages. Basically, if you infringe, you can automatically be responsible for damages, even regardless of your knowledge or or anything like that. And then going back to kind of part of your question about how important is social media, I mean, it's literally a platform for us to spread our intellectual property to others, whether it's purely just putting out content in the form of posts or LinkedIn articles, or more than that, where you're saying, hey, I invite you to download my ebook and get more insight, or come to my webinar or my course where I'm going to be talking more about things. Or maybe you're using it as a tool to get lists for your email accounts. There's just, and lists of contacts, by the way, is a huge form of intellectual property that people overlook. There's a lot of value in that, and that is intellectual property. So the answer is just, it's infinite. It's so broad.
Yeah, it is. And that list thing is interesting, because you can get a lot of emails on there, but do you really have permission to use it? That's
right.
Another question that touches into whether or not you should add that to your, email marketing list, etc. So yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't read the, what do you call them? All of the, the
terms of use and
yes,
stuff like that.
yes.
Yeah. And it's plus there's different rules, like there's GDPR if you are doing business. Well, it's hard to define because we're online. Like technically, people in the EU can see what you're doing, right? There's also, California privacy rules that are specific to California. Again, people in California are accessing your website. So it can be really difficult to determine what you need to be doing, what you need to be complying with. And then, of course, anytime you use like third parties for whether it's a website or an email marketing campaign, you're agreeing to their terms. And let's be realistic, we're not all reading every terms of service for everything we sign up for.
Right.
And, it's probably going to work out most of the time. But when you want to be cautious about really important things, especially if you're uploading stuff to some sort of database, you really want to be careful that you're not giving up any actual intellectual property rights if that's something that's valuable to you.
Excellent. And the importance of working with people who understand you and understand your business and your goals. So you
Mm.
started with this, right? You started with how important this is. How you take a different holistic approach to those legal services. Share with the audience from your seat as a business owner how you do that and why it's important.
Yeah, so personally, I want to work with other people who understand me and my business and my goals so that when they're helping me make decisions and strategize, it's going to make sense for me. And I
Mhm.
think the same is true with law, where a lot of people may think that law, it's black and white. I can hire any attorney who knows the subject matter and it's going to get the job done. But what I do in my practice is I try to get to know the client's specific values, goals, intentions, because they may come to me and say, I need XYZ. And
Mhm.
I might listen to them and say, are you sure you need XYZ? Because it sounds like you might need ABC instead. And we talk through it. And then, that actually is what makes the most sense for them. And I also try to have an approach that doesn't just take into account the law. Of course, it's my job to advise the law and like best case scenario for the law and all of that. But I also try to take into account practical considerations. Does it make sense to do everything all at once? Does it make sense to, fight this battle, knowing the risk that comes on the other side of that? So there's just a lot of things where I try to take in a whole big picture and help my clients make an informed decision that's best suited for them. And the more you know, the easier it comes and more clarity you have around making decisions. So I think, the way that I want to do business with other people is understanding what they're doing for me and for them to understand me. And so I implement that sort of same value into my practice as a lawyer.
Yeah, because going to an attorney for especially new business owners, new entrepreneurs can be intimidating. And
Mhm.
helping to create a level playing field where your expertise is truly going to be where they allow it. And
Yeah.
if they're open and vulnerable with you and honest with you and they're speaking the truth with you, it's easier in that sense for you to build trust and get to know each other. And I love that because that's what we preach about culture in organizations, is that they're more open and transparent and responsive and growth minded type environments where there is a foundation of trust. Those are often businesses and organizations that truly do have a better ability and capability to thrive. And so I love that you have adapted and pardon me, adopted that into your business practice and in the way you bring people on, because seeing an attorney can be intimidating.
It can be, and that's exactly what I want to avoid. It doesn't have to be. And I don't want people to ever not come to an attorney out of fear, out of confusion. Just like I try to make it as efficient, transparent, unintimidating as possible. Um, Truly, I really do. And I
Yeah.
think that people will tell me that after they talk to me. So the hard part is saying, hey, it's okay. It's not going to be scary. You're not going to drive around all day. I'm not going to just throw out big words and not help you understand what it is and just say, give me the money and we'll do it. Like, I want you to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and feel like that's the right decision for you. So, yeah, I hope that my clients see that. But that's the point. That's the purpose.
I think they do. When I was researching you, everybody loves your work. They love your interaction and you get great results. And so it was great to see all that.
Thank
And
you.
so talk about, this is kind of fun. Talk about the myths and the pitfalls that you know about, that you come across, and that most people often are anxious about, more than likely.
Mm, so many myths and just a lot of misinformation out there. That's another thing, about reputation and, source identifiers. You got to be able to find the truth and find credible sources. But one of the things that I see the most of is people think that because they got their LLC in their state, that they have some sort of protection over the name of their business. But that's completely false. There could be 50 different companies with the same exact name throughout the United States, one in every state. And truthfully, only one of them probably has the actual rights to be using it. Now, trademarks are about context. So I'll use Delta as an example. Delta Faucets and Delta Airlines, they're both named Delta, and they're both allowed to have the same name and do business, right? Because they do completely different things, Faucet and Airlines. No one's going to confuse Faucet and Airlines. But in other instances that aren't so dramatically black and white, you can't have the same name. So if there was like Delta Business Consulting, and then there was Delta Executive Coaching, those might not be able to coexist because the services are too close. One could even strictly be education, like a blog, and one could be an actual service provider, and it's still too close. So the reality is an LLC doesn't give you any rights to the name, and whether you can have a name or whether you're considering infringing really comes down to context and about consumer perception and whether consumers could potentially think that these products or services come from the same source.
That's a great example. What other pitfalls are there with trademark and IP? Excuse me.
Let's see. Another one is thinking that it's only for the big guys. And that one I hear a lot. And it's actually quite the opposite because the big guys have the money and they have the whereabouts to go pursue an infringer. Whereas a small company, they think it doesn't apply to them, but really that's the only thing that can protect them is having that, right? So, and I mentioned this earlier as well, like the bigger companies that you think have it because they're big, they got it when they were small, right? Like I have this Yeti here. I like to use this as an example. Well before Yeti became anybody, the Yeti was a protected trademark registration. The guy who owns Yeti, I can't remember his name, but he filed that on his own as an individual way back then. So it doesn't just, you don't just start out big. You have to do the legwork, which includes protecting your brand.
Right. And often those businesses don't budget for this up front. And then by the time they're in it 10 years later, 8 years later, and they come across some of these issues, is it harder? Is it easier? Or is it just the process that they've got to go through?
It really depends on the circumstances. So I had one client recently, been in business for 8 years, multi-7-figure, maybe even 8-figure business. And they had a name that they didn't go through the trademark process up front. And then they came to me to do the trademark process. Well, in the meantime, the other company that had a similar name came out and they're like, nope, it's time. You need to change it. We're starting to get consumer confusion. And that's what happened. And so they had to take the 8 years of brand recognition and, do a whole marketing campaign to inform their clients of the rebrand, inform their customers of the rebrand. And it certainly wasn't a cheap process or an easy process. And every business is going to be a little bit different, especially if it's super tied to you as the owner and people are hiring you and not your business, it's going to be easier. But that's not a very scalable business model if it's really that inherently tied to you.
Right.
So there are companies who just never got around to it and then realize, 15 years later, like the internet's a big thing now, maybe I should do that, and there's no problem. But it just kind of depends on the circumstances and how lucky you got and how unique your name is.
Any other myths that people should be aware of or a pitfall?
One thing is that people think that slight variations in spelling or variations in brand names can be sufficient, and that's just not the case. There's something like a sound, sight, and meaning equivalent. So if it sounds similar, or if it has a similar meaning, or if the words are like flipped around, or it's popular now to like take out all the vowels from words.
Yes.
Those are still considered the same from a trademark standpoint. So if you think that there might be a similar brand out there, it's in your own best interest to avoid it. You really want to be distinctive in the marketplace.
Right.
So people don't confuse you. That's why you'll see the big companies like Pepsi, Exxon, Google, Yahoo. These are like made up words, because the stronger your name is, the more broad protection you have. Nobody can name anything Pepsi, essentially. But
Right.
if you have, Apple is a little bit under that. Nobody can have Apple computers, but Apple might be okay for other things because it's a regular word, like it's an apple,
Right. That's great. That is great to know. And yes, I do see a lot of people pulling the vowels out of words and using that as their company name. It's interesting. You see that all the time, especially in today. Well, it looks like we're wrapping up here. So is there any last comments about IP and trademark and the legality of it that you want to share with our audience?
I think I'll just summarize that it's super important for businesses and personal brands to have a foundational understanding of it, to make sure they're considering it and in their decision making and strategizing and planning, not only for a protection standpoint, but also so that they can use it as a tool for leverage, so that they can scale their business. You can use intellectual property to work for you, whether it's for passive income, whether it's to, reduce overhead. There's just so many different ways that you can use intellectual property as a tool for you, in addition to the protection component.
Excellent. And how can people connect with you? How can they reach out to you, Erica?
Yes, so DiAngelo Law is all over DiAngeloLaw.com, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm Erica Allen. You can find me on Instagram at Erica Biz Lawyer is my handle. And you can shoot me an email, and we do free 15-minute discovery calls going back to, empowering people through education. So if you want to talk about your specific situation, you can either schedule a call on my website or email me, erica@DiAngeloLaw.com.
Excellent. Erica, thank you so much. This has been very insightful, and I've enjoyed it. And I appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you, Lori. It flew by.
It does. It always does. It's like 45 minutes go within seconds. It does. This was very informative, though. We appreciate you and thank you, and look forward to what's coming up. Definitely.
Thanks, Lori.
All right. Thank you, everyone, again for another episode of Maximize Excellence. And we look forward to our next episode and having you attend. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Maximize Excellence. Visit our events page on our website for details on upcoming podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel to listen to past episodes. And remember to ask yourself at the end of each day, did I do my best to maximize excellence today?